Well, let's just dive in because this will be recorded and posted after the fact. So, hey, everybody, Tim here from the Find Out podcast. We're starting to do more Substack Lives, which is really exciting. And I think this is our first one. So, we are joined today by a good friend of the show, Ken Harbaugh, who is the host of the Ken Harbaugh Show on the Midas Network. So, Ken, very nice to meet you, or nice to see
Yeah.
you. I've met you before.
Nice to see you. Indeed. Good to be here. Glad to see the
Yeah.
numbers ticking up. This is exciting. Yeah. Just getting into Substack Live myself. So excited to kick this off with you, Tim.
Yeah. So I met Ken a few weeks ago because he was the main driver around the Unite for Veterans rally in DC. Him and a very small crew of folks managed to get, I think it was close to 10,000 people down to the mall to stand up for veterans, which I thought was really great. And the Dropkick Murphys were there. They were awesome. And also our co-host, Chris Goldsmith, works with you as well. So, and I should also mention to folks that you are a former Navy pilot, and so you are a veteran. And we're going to dive into a couple topics here. So, obviously, the topic of the day is the Epstein list in the report yesterday from the Wall Street Journal that, in a shock to absolutely nobody, it appears that Donald Trump is in the list, or in the files, we should say.
Right.
I'm curious to get your take, because I know you've talked about this a fair amount. But what do you make of this? Is this like the end for him? Is this just another in a long list of things we think is going to sink him in nothing? What do you think?
Well, I mean, first of all, how deeply ironic is it that the Wall Street Journal is the one twisting the knife? Reed Galen has said this before on my show, and I think this observation is one of the most insightful about MAGA and that entire pit of vipers. The only people those folks hate more than us, hate more than you and me, their critics, are each other.
Yep.
And you just get the sense that the Murdochs have been waiting for the moment to drive the knife deep into Trump's back. So my guess is they have a lot more where this is coming from. And their lawyers would not have let them push this out unless it was bulletproof, unless they had Donald Trump dead to rights on writing that letter, on being in the files. So I don't think this story is going away. And you know what? It is different than the other scandals that Trump has managed to weasel out of, because in this case, the call is coming from inside the House. Unlike all of the other things that he's been able to pivot away from or distract us with another whataboutism. What he's attempting this time is to accuse Obama of treason and say, look over here. The problem with the Epstein story is that his base, his most ardent supporters for the better part of a decade, have been the ones braying for blood, calling for the files to be released, saying that there's something really rotten here, and they're being the ones told that they're idiots. It's not him pointing at the left and saying they're out to get me. He has to go after his own people, and that's what makes this different.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? Because they've built a whole he's built a whole cult of personality around draining the swamp. And it goes directly against that if all of a sudden he is defending the swamp of which he is a part.
Yes.
and actually telling his supporters, get over it, or if you believe in this, I don't want your support, which is really the first time we've seen him go after them, which is a really fascinating thing. And I think, some people will just be the Trump cult and move on. But there is a significant segment that I think really feels like they got the wool pulled over their eyes.
I agree. And his tactic of trying to reshift the focus to Obama and this ridiculous charge of treason, which I'd like to talk about as well. But I think that's going to backfire as well, because it's an example of a distraction that is going to end with another dead end. I mean, Trump is already putting out AI images of Obama in handcuffs being dragged away, right? That is never going to happen. So the thing that he's telling his supporters to pay attention to is going to be yet another disappointment. And I think at some point, his supporters are going to say, why do we keep falling for this, especially when it comes to something like the Epstein files, which goes to the heart of their identity? For a decade, they've been saying, we're the people who care about kids, who care about breaking up these deep state cabals of pedophiles.
Yep.
And now they're the ones being told they're the idiots. Um, Not
Yeah.
incorrectly in some cases.
No, well,
Mhm.
right. I mean, like believing him with anything, you have to kind of, you know, but
Yeah.
it's not. You have to dispel belief for to be able to do that. But the other thing today, and then we'll talk about the Obama stuff, is that his personal attorney, who is now in the White House, Todd
Yeah.
Blanche, is apparently, maybe even as we speak, in the jail cell with Ghislaine. I always say her name wrong, but Ghislaine Maxwell, who is the
Yeah.
only person that has been prosecuted in the Epstein stuff and is serving, I believe, 20 to 25 years for sex trafficking. Uh, and I was on a call earlier with Brian Tyler Cohen, and he made a really good point. He's like, "What do you think they're talking about? Because they already know everything that she knows. Like
Yeah.
it's all in the files. So." What do you think they're talking about? I mean, I have a guess, but
Look,
I'm curious.
she's getting a deal, or she's being given a length of rope, right? Um, and again, I don't think this is going to work the way they think it's going to work, because in 2026, unless we shoot ourselves in the feet again, we're going to have a Democratic House of Representatives.
Yep.
And the more Trump works to keep this out of the public eye, the more it stays in the public eye. Like, I would love to see Ghislaine Maxwell be compelled to testify, even if what she's saying is Donald Trump had nothing to do with it. I want to keep this story in the public eye for as long as possible. She is not credible no matter what she says. If she says he was there, if she says he's not there. The important thing for us is to keep people thinking about it, to keep people focused on it. And I think having Ghislaine Maxwell out there talking about it, regardless of what she says, keeps Americans thinking about it, keeps investigators like the freelance private investigators diving into the story.
Right.
And the reality is that there is so much evidence beyond just Ghislaine Maxwell and what she may or may not say, that the more people care about the story, the more they'll realize what a horrible human being Donald Trump is.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a tactic. In this particular case, it's like the truth, but like Republicans have done this forever, right? They made up the email thing, they made up the Benghazi stuff, and they hammer it over and over again. And in this
Yep.
case, we actually have the president of the United States on a list that was developed by known sex traffickers. So, like, it's a real thing, but the tactics, we should be talking about it. And you're right. We're going to have subpoena power. And honestly,
Mhm.
like, even if she goes up and lies, she has to worry because in 2 years, if the Democrats take the presidency, the Justice Department could go back at her for if they find out that she was lying under oath. So it's a really bad situation for them to be in, no matter what. Especially after running away and going on recess for 6 weeks, so that they didn't have to take a vote on the Epstein on releasing the list, which
Right.
is what Speaker Johnson just did.
Ending all of the business of government to protect a pedophile. That is literally what the Republican-controlled House of Representatives just did. But at the same time, you have just enough dissidents within the GOP caucus that their life is going to be hell. And this issue isn't
Mhm.
going away. I think it was an 8-2 vote subpoenaing the records in that subcommittee, a Republican-controlled
Yep.
subcommittee. Speaker of the House he's losing control over the narrative here. And I mean, I have zero sympathy for the man. Mike Johnson is a horrible
Right.
human being, but
Yeah.
I'm just trying to imagine the position he's in. On one hand, getting calls from the president of the United States saying, make this go away, even if it means shutting down the government. On the other hand, getting pressure from members of his caucus. And you got to believe some of his diehard constituents who actually believe this stuff saying, release the files.
What?
Yeah, I'm glad his
Yeah.
life is miserable right now.
And here is the big thing, right? And this is what listeners can do, and we'll talk about this more. But like, if you see your members of Congress in district, you should ask them if, especially if you're a Republican, because we know the Democrats are going to say yes. But ask them, what do you think about what releasing the Epstein? Make them talk about it. And I think most
Yeah.
of them probably will not have town halls because they do not want this question. But next year they're going to have to campaign and they're going to have to do events, and like they need to be hounded on this question because it's a political loser for them, right? Because they either go against the president and deal with his
Yeah.
wrath, or they agree with the public and also bad for the president and their chances. Like I think that there's a real risk that a lot of Republicans will stay home next year.
Yeah, sure. And in those districts where the Republican representatives are choosing not to face their own constituents, hold the town hall anyway. Put an empty
Right.
chair on the stage. We've done that a handful of times around Northeast Ohio, where we have cowardly Republicans who refuse to literally represent, refuse to do
Yep.
their jobs. We hold the town hall anyway, and it generates news coverage. It's also just really good for the base to be able
Right.
to get in a room together and vent a little bit and display like vividly with that empty chair in the front of the room that they are literally not being represented. So go for it. There are ways to
Yeah.
do this without having to rely on the attendance of your no-show Republican congressman.
Right. So let's turn to the Obama stuff, because there's been lots of figurative bombs thrown his way to the point where he even responded, which to
Yeah.
get him to respond to something in the political arena when it's not election season is a very difficult thing to do. But essentially, Donald Trump and I shudder to even call her the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, have said that they have incriminating evidence that Barack Obama interfered with investigations to try to show that there was fraud in the 2016 election, I believe is the case, um, of which there is no evidence of that. But walk us through a little bit of like your understanding of what they're trying to say and why it's complete
Yeah.
nonsense.
Well, what they're trying to do is distract us from Epstein. So we
Right.
have to be diligent and careful. This is in some ways, a great example of the effectiveness of something like this. We have gone from talking about Epstein to talking about this. We have to, though. It's our jobs, and we're going to debunk it. I'll start with just quoting Marco Rubio, who said there is irrefutable evidence of Russian interference in that election. I mean, Trump's own cabinet secretary validated what the Obama administration found. What bothers me most of all about this is, look, it's one thing for the president of the United States to use his friends in the media or powerful business interests to lie about his political opponents, but to leverage the powers of government, in particular the IC, the intelligence community,
Mhm.
to go after political enemies, that is new territory for America. And it is incredibly alarming. No one should be surprised that Tulsi Gabbard is doing this. It's why she was picked. Every Republican who voted for her should be deeply ashamed that they fell for the charade when she was testifying during her Senate confirmation hearings. But to use the power of the intelligence community to go after a political opponent and accuse a former president of treason, I mean, it's alarming on its face, right? But it's alarming for deeper reasons. One, what is the intelligence community not looking at? Because it has to do this kind of thing. It's
Right.
exposing America. Um, and two, what is it doing to the long-term health of the intelligence community when the personnel who make up that community are now part of a political charade? How does
Right.
that affect your ability to do your job, your willingness to do your job, when the leader of your department, of that whole branch of government, is telling you that your job is going after political enemies? It worries me deeply. And look,
Yeah.
I'm a guy who's, as a Navy pilot, my job was recon and ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Most of my products were fed to the NSA. I consider myself a part of that community and that
Hmm.
establishment, and take great pride in it. But to think that to imagine being a part of politically repressive organization, I know how it must be affecting the folks in that line of work right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's this is probably for another day, but there's a massive brain drain of good talent that is leaving the
Yep.
government because they don't want to deal with these people. But going back to the original, about this, this thing about treason, what's fascinating is that they haven't actually said what was treasonous, right? Because there
Right.
isn't anything, and even when you look at it, it's laughable. Like even when the media was talking about this, most of them were like, "We have talked about this. Like there is no evidence." And I think it's important for people to know, though, that Republicans have been doing two things. They're conflating two issues here. They're conflating the very real fact that Russia meddled in our elections. We know that it is proven.
Yep.
Like they were doing Facebook groups for fake events. They were sowing dissent. Obviously, we know the bots. You've probably all interacted with them yourselves without even realizing it. Um, and the dossier, which because that has a lot of that has been discredited, and they're blurring the lines to confuse people to not understand, so that that what they're trying to do is say that Russia never had anything to do with our elections, which is patently false. But the other part of this that cracks me up is that the Supreme Court has given presidents immunity over official acts. So
Yep.
even if, which it's not true, that they claimed that Barack Obama did what they said, it was an official act, so it doesn't. It's a moot point unless. And I made this, I made this comment on a video, but like unless there is a brown man president clause, which those guys would probably they consider, there is no way that you could prosecute him for anything. Anyways, like it doesn't make any sense. And you're right.
Yeah.
It's just smoke and mirrors.
Right. I mean, the fact that there is cognitive dissonance throughout all of this should be the tell, right? They're not even internally consistent with things like this. They're not internally consistent on anything. Pick any policy and you'll find five different explanations for it. Tariffs being a prime example, right? But that's not the point. The point, especially with this charge of treason against the former president, is to distract. It's to create an alternate reality with smoke and mirrors to distract from the thing they are most terrified of, which is accountability, in this case, for the Epstein files.
Yeah, and it's very clear, like it's come out because this White House leaks like a sieve because these guys are
Mhm.
all out for themselves, that Trump is panicking because it's the first time that he has not been able to control the narrative, at least with his base.
Right.
And that's the thing that is really scaring him. So for folks that are listening and watching, like, and we all have the friends that are like, why didn't Joe Biden release the list? Which is also a tell because it's like Biden put a wall between himself and the DOJ so that there wasn't any political interference. So your question is really directed to Merrick Garland, not to Joe Biden, because he didn't try to meddle. They also didn't make a big deal about it, and we don't just release documents just to release documents
Yeah.
all the time, especially in criminal cases. But I think people need to ask their friends, like, what is the charge? And I think you will see it melt away quite quickly. And I've even noticed some people that I've known from, I'm from Maine, so I have Maine's it's a blue state, but much redder than where I live in Brooklyn. They're not even really trying to fight it though, because it's a really hard thing to do. So yeah.
Well, I'm curious about that. What is the rationale for those who the president has cowed? I mean, Mike Johnson doesn't offer a rationale. He just shuts down the government and
Right.
runs for his life, right? But for those who have to speak out, for the influencers on the air who have decided to go along, I mean, how do they? What are they saying?
Well, from what I've seen, because I decided to hate myself for a few minutes and went on Twitter to see what was going on, which I do not advise anybody else to do. And it's really funny because there is a whole right-wing grifter network that makes their money off of the outrage, right? And
Yeah.
Epstein has been at the core of that. So these guys have become even more unhinged, and they don't offer an explanation and they don't really get into it. They just they talk about the crime of the century. And this is like, finally, the truth is, they're doing all these things that conspiracy theorists do to keep going. But it's not a really like I don't think it's really working because
Mhm.
like the evidence is so clear in this case. I think the question is how many of these people actually finally turn their backs? And I don't expect them to vote for Democrats, but who like stay home next year instead of going to vote like that or in
Yeah.
2028? Because these Trump voters are one of the most finicky groups that we've ever seen. I mean, like we saved Tammy Baldwin and Elise Slotkin and Jackie Rosen, and I think there was Tammy Baldwin, because so many Trump voters went in and checked the Donald Trump box and then never filled out anything else and left. Like
Yeah.
these people are there for Trump, but if they're not there for Trump anymore, who? What do they do?
Well, I hope there's a cumulative effect as well, not just with the disappointment over the Epstein files, but everything else that Donald Trump is fumbling, from the price of eggs to energy costs now projected to skyrocket, to just the moral queasiness, in some cases outrage about how he's treating their neighbors, like the gardener or the guy
Right.
mowing the lawn outside of IHOP who had 3 sons in the Marine Corps, who's tackled by 4 masked government thugs. I mean, I think you add all that up, and I think there's potential for a lot of these voters to think, you know what? Maybe the Republican Party wasn't for the little guy after all. Maybe
Right.
it was all a big lie. And it might be something like the Epstein files that sort of cracks it open just enough to let some of the light out and illuminate for these voters just how long and effectively they've been lied to.
I think it's right. And I think that a lot of the American public can, has in the past sort of had their heads in the sand until this stuff was shoved in their faces, right? Like you
Yeah.
said, like once it started to affect them, they know a person, right, that was snatched, no due process, sent to El Salvador. Or like the fact that we're sending people, undocumented immigrants, to countries they've never been before, like Sudan, of all places, which is a war-torn country that can't obviously support any of this, but are also not in a position to say no. And I think, like, we look at the polling for him, he's underwater on immigration. Like, he's always dominated on immigration in these polls. He is underwater, and he's not underwater by like 2 points. He's underwater by like 20 points. So I think you're right. I think that Democrats, and I think this will be our final question before we wrap, because we both have hard stops here. But what do Democrats need to do to capitalize on this? Because we don't need to just get 5 or 6 seats next year. We need to get 40. So what do we need to do to make that
Yeah.
happen?
Well, we need to keep banging the drum. We can't let up, and we have to be responsible as other stories come up, like this spurious charge of treason against the former president. But we have to keep going back to the lies and the corruption and the grift of the Trump administration. I think Epstein is, I hate to reduce this to politics, but it's a golden mine for us. When we win back the House in 2026, we need to hold hearings. We we need
Yep.
to keep shining the light on just how thoroughly corrupt the Trump regime is. And look, I'm not one who buys into this notion that we should only focus on kitchen table issues, but I do think those issues are going to be their own kind of flywheel. When Donald Trump takes to the presidential podium and says gas is as cheap as it's ever been, it's $1.99 a gallon. Those are the kinds of lies that you just can't get away with anymore. I mean, it's one thing to lie about a so-called stolen election where, you can invent facts and then have the talking heads to debate them. When you're lying about the price of gas and people go out their front door and hop in their car and go down
Yeah.
their driveway and see that it's a lie, uh, I think this is a sign of a panicking president, and now is the time to keep up the pressure.
I think you're right. And I mean, the energy cost thing is really interesting because I don't think people really realize what that means. And what it is from I mean, I'd be calling it the big bullshit bill, but that bill they signed takes out a lot of credits for solar and wind energy, which
Yep.
that capacity was they were counting on that capacity for this expansion of AI. AI is an incredibly energy intense process because it's essentially searching the entire internet for your answers is what it's doing. And it's doing it millions of times over simultaneously. And Trump's taking those away. So what's going to happen when we build those data centers? All of a sudden, there's going to be a demand pull. And they think the estimates, like the average American's going to pay $400 more a year next
Yeah.
year for electricity for nothing. It's just the same thing. And he was elected to deal with inflation. I mean, my God, $400 extra for a family that makes 40 grand a year could be devastating, especially when they're going to lose their Medicaid insurance. And like, that's another thing. I mean, that's happening like in 2026 because they've gamed the system for some of these worst things that happen after elections. Yep. But I don't think they're going to be able to get away with it. And same with eggs,
No.
right? And actually, inflation as a whole was dropping and is now starting to tick back up. So I think they're in a world of hurt. And I'm going to end with this. We're going to plug each other. So part of the problem here, guys, is that corporate media is not covering this the way that it needs to be covered or as consistently as it needs to be. So like subscribing to Ken's show to find out others like it is really, really important because it helps to educate you so you could talk to your friends and family. So anything do and support us with either a free or a paid subscription. It helps to keep the lights on. And so, Ken, I'll give you the last word. Other than on the Ken Harbaugh Show Substack, is there anywhere else people should be following you?
Yeah, look, they cannot silence us if we have the support directly from our viewers. We don't work for Paramount, right? We don't work for CBS, and everybody knows what I'm referring to. The most successful late night talk show host right now is canceled because he spoke out against Donald Trump. They can't cancel us because we are not obeying in advance. We are not Trump's subjects. But yeah, follow the Find Out podcast, follow the Ken Harbaugh Show on Substack, anywhere you get your podcasts, and really appreciate the support. We're building this thing from the ground up.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, like there is a group of us, like Ken and us, who are working together in a way that I don't think has really happened before. Because usually when people are doing these independent projects, they're focused on their making money, and I think we all started because we saw a weakness in how people were getting information. We were getting dominated by conservatives. So some of us are stepping up and doing that, but we do need the support of people to keep going and to have that impact. So I appreciate the 141 of you who are on here right now, which is great for a no announcement 12:30 on a Thursday interview.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, so I want to thank Ken. We're going to do more of this, guys, both with Ken and with other people. So subscribe to Find Out, subscribe to the Ken Harbaugh Show. Have a great Thursday, and I guess that's it. I didn't really know how to end that very well.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tim. We'll do it again.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.